Hello, this is Diane Dalton. This is a short video showing you an introduction to how to write graphical user interface applications using Visual Studio. So I'm going to show you how to start a new project. I already have my Visual C# opened, so I'm going to go to the File, New, and create a new project. And it asks me what type of project I want to create. This time I'm going to do a Windows Forms application that gives you a graphical user interface. So I'm going to click that, and I need to give it a name down here. Now this is going to be the namespace. I'm going to just call it a demo application. And it by default puts both the same name in both places. Now you do not need to put a file extension here. That will be added automatically for you. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a separate directory for your solution to hold all of your files. Click OK. And what was done is the project was created, and there's a lot of background code that was already written for me that I don't have to write again. And that's one of the wonderful advantages of using this tool. There's so much that's already done. Now I'm going to close this output window because I don't need that right now. And it gives me more visibility into my form. So this is a form, and think of it as a new Windows application. That's going to be the window, and you're going to write things on that form. Now the things that we're going to use to write on there are going to be different controls, and those controls are familiar. You've seen them before. Buttons, text boxes, labels, those are the simple ones we're going to use initially. But I need to have my toolbox visible, so I'm going to go to View. I'm going to turn on my toolbox. So these are my tools that I'm going to use to build onto my form. And we're going to start with just a few simple things. These are some of the examples. This will help you get through the examples in Chapter 3. First of all, I'm going to put a couple of text boxes. And the way to do this is you just click on the button or on the type and you drag it over here and release. And now I have just created a text box on my form. I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to put another text box. I'm going to put it right beside it. And you see as I'm doing that, this blue line shows up. That helps me align things neatly. Right. So now I have two text boxes. I'm also going to put in a label. I'm going to put a label up at the top. And I'm going to put another label down at the bottom. And in the middle, I'm going to click and hold. I'm going to put a button right here in the middle. Now each of these is an object. We've talked some about object-oriented programming. Now we're really working with objects. Because I have enough things on here, I'm going to close my toolbox, or I'm going to hide it for now, so I have more space to show. All right, so let's look at these. Each of these objects is pre-written code that we're using from the library, from the Visual Studio library, so we don't have to write all of this again. All right, now let's take a look at the label. We'll go with the label first. And over here we're going to look at properties. And again, I'm going to close my Solution Explorer window just so I have more space to look at the properties. I can always get that back by going to the View button. All right, so this is a list of properties associated with this object, which is called Label 1. Two of the important properties to look at are the text of the property, and that's what is actually displayed. I'm going to change that. I called it, this is a demo program. So now that's what's showing. All right, another important property is the name. The name of the object is how we're going to refer to it in the program. All right, so this is label 1, and I'm going to call that my label title. Now, by changing it to label title, that means anywhere in the program, instead of trying to figure out what was label 1, what was label 2, I have a more meaningful name. And in this case, it's going to be called label title. This name has to follow all of the rules of identifiers. It can't have any spaces, it can't use any reserved keywords, and it can't have any strange special characters in it. Also can't start with a number. But it is good practice to keep the type, in fact this is a label, in front of the title, the meaningful name part. Alright, so that's the text. Now, that was just displaying this. Now there's a few other options in here. Obviously, anything you can do with text, you can generally change your font, your size. So here's a little dialog box to change font. This is how I can change the look of this label. So I could pick any font I want. I can make it bold, I can make it larger. Okay, again, those are just attributes of that label. All right, now I'm going to look at the text boxes. I have two. Just like any other objects that you could do, say in Windows, Office, PowerPoint, or Word, I can move these objects around very easily. Okay, I can resize them if I want them a different size. You can just use your sizing handles and resize things. Same with the button, I can make that bigger. Okay, so any of those things, very easy to do with a point and a click. So back text box 1. Again, this has a name. It's called text box 1. I'm going to rename that to text box number 1. Now you don't see anything here. Please remember the distinction between the name of the object, which is how you're going to refer to it in your program, and the text. The text is a different property. The text is what's showing. I'm looking for the text. In this case, the text is blank. See, we have no text in this box right now. Okay, I'm going to change my other text box to a different name. So I'm going to go to Name, and this one I'm going to call Zip Code. So that might be an example of something you need to enter. Okay, so that's how it's going to be referred to in your program. And again, it's still, the output is blank. There is nothing in there to begin with. I have to find that. There's the text. Okay, now let's look at the button. Now we need to name this button as well. So let's go find the name of this button. We're going to call this button Submit. Okay, remember that's the name that it's going to be referred to in the program. If I want it to display something different, I can change the text. So I'm going to have it say Submit. And for now, I'm just going to leave label 2 unchanged. All right, if I don't like this layout, I can just move these things around a bit. I could stack them up, I can move them over. All right, so get the point there. Those are all very flexible in how you position things. Well, now how do we make this program do something? We've all been trained that when you click on a button, it will make something happen. So what we're going to do is we want to create an event that will happen when we click on this button. So to do that, we're going to double click right here on the button. Double click. Now what we've gone into is this is our C# code. We have a class called the Form1. That was that window we were working with. This is a lot of pre-written code that initialized it for you. We didn't have to do any of that. Now what we've just done is created a new method called button submit. Remember, that's how we named it, _click. So that's the method. So when somebody clicks on that button, this code in this code block will be executed. Now it's up to us to write this code and say, what are we going to do with this code? Alright, so first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to put some information in here. We're going to have to declare a few variables. I'm going to have an integer that I'm going to read from my first text box. And I'm just going to call that number 1. I'm going to set it initially to 0. I'm also going to have a zip code that I'm going to read in. Right, so those are things that I want to read from my text box. Okay, now before I can just put them directly into the text box, I actually have to convert what I read from the text box. So I'm going to go with number 1 equals, so I'm going to try and assign a value to number 1. Convert. I'm picking this function. This is a class, the convert class, and the method toInt32. This is going to convert. It's going to convert a data type to another data type. In this case, it's going to be converting a string to an int32. But I have to finish typing this. So what is it I'm going to be typing? It's going to be the text coming from my text box. And this is called IntelliSense. As I start typing, it starts coming up with a list of names that possibly match what I'm typing. So I'm going to use my text box num1. That's the one that I had named it. So I'm going to use that, but what I'm trying to convert is the text property. The text property is going to be what the user has typed into it. And I'm going to close my method arguments with a closing parenthesis and the semicolon. Right, so I'm going to do the same thing with the zip code. I want to put the zip code into this variable name. Also have to convert dot using the same function. Text box, and which one this time? I'm going to use text box zip code. And I'm going to look at the text property of that and close it up. Right. So what this program has done, this method, when I click the button, I'm going to define two new variables. I'm going to read text box num1, the text property, which is what somebody has typed in, which is always going to be a string. Okay, so that's a string of characters that you've typed. Another important concept that you need to understand, anything that you're typing in from the keyboard is a string until it has been converted into an integer. So I'm typing the string, converting it to an integer, assigning it to the variable called number1. Doing the same thing again, reading the text property of the text box zip code, converting it to int32, and assign it to zip code. All right, so now how can we know that that's been done? What we're going to do is we're going to write a little message out to that label that we left at the bottom, and we're going to put some string into the text property. So we're going to essentially compose our output sentence. So we're going to use the string.format method, and I'm just going to say the user entered, and here I'm going to use my placeholders. That's going to be for the number, and in my next placeholder for the zip code. Okay, so after my string, where I have my two placeholders, I have to put my list. It's going to have two objects, and I'm putting these onto a new line, which doesn't matter at all, but I'm going to output num1 and zip code, and then I end my string.format method call and my semicolon, and I should have everything completed. So let's try and run this. Let's see what it does. I use the shortcut key to start debugging, and here's my program. I'm going to type a number in here, I'm going to type a zip code in here, and I'm going to click submit. And there's my output. Now, the problem with that, look at it, it ran off the edge of my window. I'll show you an easy trick to change that. All right, so I'm just going to close this program with the red X, and you're going to get this stuff because that's how it exits. Don't worry about that for now. All right, so my text was too long. It ran off the edge. What I'm going to do is use an escape sequence. I'm going to use a \n. I'm going to do it twice. \n is a new line. So in the middle of writing out the sentence, what it's going to do is it's going to say the user entered, colon, and it's going to go to a new line. Going to fill in the placeholder, finish this part for the number, and starts a new line. Fill in the placeholder for the zip code. All right, so let's see how that looks different. I'm running it again. I use different numbers. I hit submit, and you can see now that my output string has been formatted differently. I hope this has helped clarify how to create and start a new graphical user interface application in Visual Studio. We went through adding controls. We used the three simple ones: a label, a text box, and a button. I showed you how to change properties, both the name, the text, and on the labels I changed the font. Remember, the name is how you call it within the program. The text is what is displayed. Then I showed you how to create a method for the click event on the button. Gave you an example of reading data from the text box, which is a string, and converting it to an integer. And then we composed and wrote a string to the label for our output. And as part of doing that, I showed you how to use that \n escape sequence to get a new line in your output. Hopefully this helped.